Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. I know that this is the first session and some of you may feel a little bit sleepy, so hopefully the great content can wake you up. My name is Elsie. I teach at the CUHK Business School. One of the subjects that I teach is social entrepreneurship and impact investment. So before joining the world of academia, I worked for a company called What If, which is an innovation consultancy. So we work with many clients, including some Fortune 500 company, to develop business solution using design thinking. So the subject of design thinking is really dear to my heart. And also, I'm sure that all of you have heard about that. Is anyone who have not heard of the word design thinking before you joined this morning? No? Okay, good, that's normal, because in Hong Kong, it's such a buzzword these days. And the Hong Kong government also advocating using design thinking and really want to improve their service and to serve the people in Hong Kong better using this method. However, what is actually design thinking? There's still some myth and some, I would say, incomplete understanding on this. So this morning we are going to share with you some perspectives, some cases on what is design thinking and how can it be applied to solve more complex problems. So it's really our pleasure to have our esteemed panel of speakers, all ladies panel. So first of all, we have Ms. Kara PECKNOLD, Creative Director of Frog Germany. Hi. Kara, may you? Yes. So everybody can see you. So Frog is a leading design and innovation agency. And we also have Ms. Christine VIOLAGO, Country Manager of Grameen Foundation, the Philippines. Grameen Foundation is a global NGO that aims at empowering the poor and also to stop poverty. Then, last but not least, we have Ms. Liza CHONG, CEO of Index, Design to Improve Life in Denmark. So they put design thinking in the heart of education. So I'm sure that we are going to learn a lot from the speakers. So in a moment, I'm going to let the speakers to tell you a little bit more about their company and what they do, and then we will have a little bit of discussion. So without further ado, may I invite Kara first.
Thanks for getting up this morning. Appreciate it. And there we go. I'm going to put on my glasses. I don't like having my glasses on, but then I can see your lovely faces. So yeah, my name is Kara PECKNOLD, and it's a real pleasure to be here. I am a creative director at Frog Design. How many of you know Frog? By a show of hands. Okay, then I need to do a little bit of educating. Frog Design is a company that's about 50 years old. We work in the area of product. Product design is really where we got our roots, where we started in Germany about 50 years ago. And since that time, the digital age has changed us and changed what we work on. So now you'll see a lot of digital products and services. We work in strategy, and we work in pretty much every industry imaginable. From healthcare to financial services, education, consumer goods, and we work in a space called impact. And so it's my pleasure to be here to tell you a little bit about some of the work that we've done in the impact space, even though we have a lot I could show you that has to do with corporate and commercial. We're global, so we're located in the United States. We have a couple studios there in Europe, and we have one in Shanghai and two in India. So today, I'm going to talk about magic, the other way. I'm going to talk about impact, and I think impact is a really big word. It's one that has a lot of definitions, especially at a conference like this, right? And I'm sure over dinner or over lunch or over coffee, you have lots of perspectives, and sometimes they can be ones that bring us together, sometimes they're ones that can separate. So for the purposes of bringing unity to the conversation today, I'm going to put a definition forward, and one that actually comes out of a quote. So less of a definition, more of a quote. And that is, we think that we are in the artifact business, but we're not. We're actually in the consequence business. And that's a really important one for me as a designer, because in my work, I make a lot of artifacts. And I don't think artifacts are necessarily wrong. I think wisdom and good decision-making can help us decide what kinds of artifacts we should be making and thinking about the consequences of what we're making. And to help me think about this, and maybe it helps you, I've put together a little framework. And this framework helps me think about, is my consequence something that is for now? Is it going to have an impact now? Or will it have some impact in the future? And is it for a few people? Or a smaller subset? Or is it for the many and the masses and society at large? So maybe that will help us today. And mostly what I'm going to do, I don't have a lot of time to talk with you today myself, but I'd like to tell you a few stories about projects that we've worked on as an organization in the space of designing for impact. The first one I'm going to tell you about is some work that we've done in the past with the Nike Foundation, and working on a project, a sub-project called The Girl Effect. And The Girl Effect was a program that was and still is intended to help girls connect with other girls so that they get educated, so that in many cases they don't get caught up in the sex trade, so that they get a life beyond a small rural community, and keep themselves connected and helping each other, give advice and counsel. And we helped to work on a project in places like Bangladesh and in Kenya, where we spent time with girls and we got to know their needs and their desires, and the idea was to create some digital services that would help them, through mobile technology, connect with each other. But we also learned some things like, in some places, girls having a mobile phone means you're in the sex trade. And so we began to think about that artifact as something that could have an impact. And what would it look like if we didn't just leave a mobile technology behind, we left something else. And what that led a group of designers at Frog to do was to develop something known as the Collective Action Toolkit. And this is a toolkit that helps anyone, regardless of your expertise, to think through, if we're going to talk about it today, the design thinking process, wherever you may be. You don't have to be a designer. We took away the design jargon as much as we could to make it a very simple and accessible toolkit. I'll show you a little bit how it works. Many times in design thinking, we see pictures of a linear process, don't we? We see a line and we say, if you start here, I think the words in the program for our summit is Empathise. And then we move into things like ideation, and we move into prototyping and testing. And what we realize is people don't really work like that. It's not that pure, it's not that simple. What we decided to do was it looks like a flower, so you can blossom and bloom. But in the center is the start. To clarify your goal was the most important thing that we felt people needed to start with. Have a reason. Why are you doing this? Oftentimes, people need a team, and so if you move into the orange circle, you'll see that we talk a little bit about building and building a team and building a network to be able to get the thing you want into the world. From there, we look at seeking understanding in the yellow circle, and we have found that if we don't actually talk to humans and get to know their needs, we make stuff and artifacts that don't make an impact. And so we want to understand the context and the needs of people before we start designing. Imagining has to do with ideating. If you are a designer, it's an ideation phase. Making is actually the prototyping and making. And then ultimately, we need to help people plan for implementation. We need to plan that it gets into the world. Otherwise, all the things we made are really nice, but they don't go anywhere. So I'll give you just one page out of the toolkit, and I'll give you a link at the end of the presentation so you can download it. It's free. It's in 4 different languages. One of them is simplified Chinese, that we've been able to get it out into the world so that people, regardless of where they are, can have access to really simple steps. On the left side of the screen of the actual card, you'll see how much time we think this will take, what kinds of people you might need to have in the room, what kinds of supplies. On the right side are 4 easy steps to let you try the design thinking process with anyone. And what we've seen is governments, businesses, designers, NGOs, educators have all downloaded this toolkit, thousands and thousands and thousands, which obviously makes us feel really excited. But we wanted to hear how people were using it. And we've heard lots of different ways that people are using it, but the one that gets me really excited is one from a group in Myanmar. And they had found out about the Collective Action Toolkit. They got really excited because they said this would make an amazing curriculum, because it follows a really interesting learning path. When you think about how you need to build a new society, new things for your community. And Myanmar, as we all know, is an emerging economy, getting more and more emerged as the days go by, but needed some things to help where infrastructure wasn't in place, where education had a new opportunity to shift. And I love this quote from one of the co-founders, Rochelle. For her, design thinking requires a different perspective, especially in Myanmar, that is more focused on co-creation and local empowerment rather than flying in, making stuff, and leaving. And as designers, it's really fun to fly in and make stuff for people who don't have access to design. We see an immediate return on investment. But what we also realize is that when we step away, it's harder for us to maintain any impact as time goes by. And so the toolkit was a way to help that, to be enabling communities regardless of our presence. Today, it's a design thinking center for community engagement. They partner with a local university, and they are able to teach young people today how to be change makers. And that is the language they use, which I think is interesting. Yesterday, we heard a lot about change makers. And they are working on projects creating new systems and new infrastructure where there isn't any. And rather than me telling their story, I'm going to show you a short video that it lets them explain what they've been working on. One of the things.
Two of you are collaborating at Point B.
Yeah.
I saw a prototype. What can you tell us about that?
So what we do right now is that we work with the waste workers and a steel shop to design an optimal trash can for the campus. And then we're gonna design the whole organization behind it and the awareness on campus. And then hopefully we'll get a clean campus very soon.
And also by including all of those people, the faculty, the workers, they all feel like they had a say and they felt involved.
Yeah, they felt involved, and they're gonna embrace the design and take care of it. It's a way better approach to embed it locally and get people empowered. One of the most important things here in Myanmar is to take the first baby steps to change the status quo. And I think what we do here at Point B is that we empower people to go out and change the situation in their community. And I think that's a very important first step.
I love this story, and this is but one of how they are actually using the design thinking process to reimagine a future for this community in Myanmar. The other story I'd like to tell you about is one where we got to partner with more of a company. So I think it's easy to talk about one aspect of this. Oh, wow, 5 minutes. One aspect of this is working with a company. And so we worked with an organization called GSMA. They are the provider of all the mobile networks across the globe. They're a trade organization, and they have a mobile for development group that actually helps to create products and services for those who do not typically get access to the more expensive products in the mobile. How many of you spend a lot of money on your mobile phone? And this small video here is a woman who is getting her first access to this new product that we helped to co-design with Vodafone. And this is in Ghana, where we partnered with our client to create this new product that actually helped farmers get market pricing, they got weather information, they got the necessary tools and tips that would help them to actually maintain food security within Ghana. We did this for mobile health as well as mobile agriculture in 12 different countries. And again, we created a toolkit. Because for us, the way that we can ensure that things can scale and more organizations can have access, and this is also free to download, we did a mobile agriculture toolkit that helps phone companies think about how they can create products for those that may be at the base of the pyramid. There's also one for health, if you're interested. Does a similar thing, but targeting those who want to make mobile health products. I'd like to highlight what I see happening. What I've told you about are things where, or situations where we think about people who maybe are the farthest away from design and design thinking. And I think we've seen that design thinking can make a change in this particular area. But what I'm also seeing as a designer who works with corporates and commercial business is that companies want to make change with design thinking and work differently. And one of the projects that I got to work on recently is working with research around children and designing the future of the autonomous vehicle for kids. And that seems far away and perhaps slightly scary and unnerving. However, just so you know, people are thinking about this, and it is something that is happening in the world. So for me, it's really important as a designer to be able to work with kids directly. So this is a picture of me. We did research, we did activity camps with kids to really understand what were their fears, what were their needs, what were their aspirations. And it led my team into a really deep dive of what does it mean to design for the next generation. If we put the child at the center, what are some of the drivers and value drivers that kids have? What are some of the trends that are going on? We see that trends around these young people, your kids potentially, they're born in technology. And so what their expectations are and what their fears are not the same as ours, and yet we need to be mindful of that. We looked at overall themes around play and entertainment, and it's very tempting in the automotive business to think about doing design for entertainment in a car. But we began to think about health and well-being, and other things like learning and education. And what does that look like within the vehicle when maybe in the future mom and dad aren't riding with me, which is a crazy thing to think about. And what I'm even more proud of is that Frog participated with a group of others in Helsinki earlier this year. It was an event sponsored by UNICEF called the Children's Design Guide. And we actually came together to put the child at the center and ask ourselves, in this day and age, what are the principles that we as designers should be following in order to design the right kind of world, a happier society for children? I started with my very brief talk talking about the big word of impact. And I think my encouragement to all of us today is to not get lost in the big word of impact, but ask ourselves, what is the good we could do? What is the better we could do, and what is the best we could do? And for some of us, it will be baby steps, and some of us, it will be trying a process, like a design thinking process. Others of us will be tasked with something much larger, much greater, and to all of those things, I give you guidance, some tools that you can download and try with your work, with your colleagues, wherever you may be. These types of tools help to give you a framework. They are not prescriptive. They're not the only way, but they are one way to help give guidance as you look at ways of thinking differently about how to create a happier society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kara. There's a lot of interesting cases. I'm sure that there will be a lot of questions throwing up. So now let's hear from Christine.
Good morning, everyone, or in Filipino we say magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. My name is Christine, and I work in the Philippines for Grameen Foundation. We are a non-government organization, and today I'll be sharing about how we create breakthroughs so that we can impact and serve our communities. Okay, to start, I'd like to share a story of Joanne. That's her in the picture. She is a mother of 3 boys, and her husband is a farmer, which also means that their income can be quite seasonal. And in 2017, she opened a sari-sari store, or what we call a small neighborhood store, in the island of Panay. We have 7,000 islands, and Panay is, I think, in the south of the Philippines. And with the new technology in her store, she is now able to make financial transactions in her rural village. That's creating a breakthrough, lasting impact not only for herself, but for her community. John represents the women that we wish to serve. In Grameen Foundation, we create breakthroughs in 3 main areas. So the first is digital financial services, the second is mobile health, and the third is mobile agriculture. And at the center of these programs is a woman like Joanne, because we believe that when you equip her with the right tools, education, and financial services, she gains confidence and makes better decisions for her family, for her household, for her children, which can eventually break the generational cycle of poverty. So our approach is quite unique in a sense that we apply human-centered design from beginning and to the end of our programs. So we make sure that we understand the gaps and challenges that our target beneficiaries are facing. We pilot tools, test, gather data as evidence, and eventually push for scale. So today I'll be talking about two of the major programs and how we implement human-centered design in the Philippines. So the first one is the Community Agent Network. That's where John, as one of our beneficiaries, belongs to this program. What is the main problem that we were trying to solve? The lack of financial access nationwide in the Philippines. So this was a program that was help funded by JP Morgan and Chase. And to give you a snapshot of what we were facing, this is data from Central Bank, our central bank. In 2016, they said that 12% of first-class municipalities are still unbanked, and 100% of sixth-class municipalities. In 2017, they also said that 22% of our adult Filipino population has a formal bank account. What happens to the rest of that percentage? They go now to alternative access points. That's 50,000 as reported in 2016. What are these alternative access points? Your remittance center, your pawn shop, your money exchange, and even a sari-sari store like what Joanne has. But the gaps still remain, and we face these challenges of lack of connectivity and lack of household income so that we understand and see where can we enter and where can we help. What was our vision of resilience? So at the beginning, we make sure that we have a change or a goal that we work towards. So we wanted to impact two groups. The first one would be the household, or Joanne. So this is the household or the clients in the neighborhood. So by having an agent in the rural village, they are able to save money for transportation and save time. They no longer have to travel 40 minutes to 1 hour to make a financial transaction. Instead, they can just go to the neighborhood store and make the transaction there. So by the saving in time and in transportation costs, they can eventually invest that in other income-generating pursuits. The second one is the store owner. By having the technology in her store, she has a new base of clients or customers, and she can earn from that. And by providing her the right skills to run her business, in the long run, we can train her to make it more sustainable. So at the very beginning, of course, we wanted to introduce this technology, but what would be inside this technology? What are the merchants that would be present in this technology? So as part of our initial understanding of the gaps, we did an intensive quality research study. What does this mean? Following the actual day-to-day life of a mother in a rural village, walking with her, visiting a pawn shop, making group discussions and interviews, and sometimes we would bring in another third party, someone who is familiar in the face or in the space, or like another neighbor, so that they're more comfortable in speaking and in sharing their ideas. And then eventually, we worked with two fintech partners that would design our technology or design the technology for these household members. And this is what we found out, and this is what we tested, that if we want to go rural and go in serving the last mile, these are the main components of that technology. Number one, it should be telco agnostic. We face a lot of no data connectivity, especially when you go rural. So the technology must use any SIM card. Second, it must be client and agent friendly. Third, the less minimal data connectivity that the technology can use, the better. If it can work through SMS or a simple, or at least 2G, sometimes that would be better. The next, it must have a receipting function. So if you want to introduce a technology to a community, building trust is the key. And one of which is, in this case, since it involves payment, building trust, a receipting function, or a proof of transaction through receipt or SMS is ideal. Because sometimes, as a mother, they make the payment, and then eventually they show the receipt to their husband or to their children to say, I paid this already and our money is safe. That's, I guess, very cultural in some areas in the Philippines. There is no need to pre-register. So our technology ensures that nobody has to register to a new account or own a mobile money. So this is actually an over-the-counter transaction. So what happens is, I don't need to own a phone to make the financial transaction. I bring the cash to the store owner. So for example, I want to pay my electricity bill or my utility water bill or top up of load. I give the cash to the agent takes it from me, and then eventually the agent who has the tool makes the transaction for the customer. So it takes down the barrier and allows women to be part of the digital space. And lastly, it must be physically portable. So by the end of the program, we were able to establish 1,986 agents, or close to 2,000, in 423 barangays. If you will look at this, a lot of it is concentrated in Luzon. So we're divided in 3 main islands. In Luzon, wherein our fintechs are located. But this picture shows us that there's still great potential for scaling. And at the very beginning of our interviews with the mothers, they told us, we make remittances at least 3 to 4 times a month. We value payments as government bills and utilities, and our data shows, this is data from our fintech partners, and our data shows that the top 5 transactions involved in mobile technology include top-up of load, remittance, e-money, bills payment, government bills, electric bills, cable bills, internet bills, and banking and microinsurance, and lastly, entertainment vouchers and ticketing. We also did a profile of who our clients are. Why is this important? Because if you are the fintech partner, you want to understand the behavior of your clients. So these are the 3 main observations that we gathered. The first one is the typical client is your neighbor, or what we call the suke. This is a loyal customer who would go to the agent not because of the fees, but because of the added services and the relationship built between them. So this agent can be a good friend for more than 5 years or has been established in the community, so they keep coming back because of the additional services provided by the agent. The second is the skeptic. This is probably the most difficult behavior to change. This kind of customer would still go, even if there's a new agent in the community, he or she would still go far distant to make the transaction because that's what he or she is used to. So how do we change this behavior? He or she would need an authority figure to tell her that you can trust this system. And last is the experienced user. This is your typical digital native who is already up to the trends, is used to make a transaction in various agents, but what does he or she value? The quickness of the transaction. So again, this profile helps us to understand how do we market our services and how can we help target these kinds of clients. By the end of the program, we found out that there's still a lot of barriers for women to be part of the digital space. So what we did was we conducted another program called Women Link to understand these barriers. Again, just to highlight, they still have insufficient knowledge of financial products, their inability to register sometimes in new platforms or mobile platforms, the lack of relevant merchants in the platform. Sometimes, the only thing I want to do is pay a local electric bill. But if that merchant is not available in the platform, then that's not relevant for me. I would still have to go far. So what we did was we registered 20,000 women also to provide financial tips and action-oriented in a 6-month period for SMS. How many minutes? 5 minutes? Okay. And this allows us to have a touch point with our beneficiaries, even if the program ends. So that's the digital financial services. I'd like now to focus on another program called FarmerLink. And the goal of this program was to help coconut and cacao farmers in the island of, in the province of Davao. Coconut is actually one of our biggest exports, but sadly, they're also one of the poorest farmers in the Philippines. They earn an annual income of about $440 annually. So what we wanted to do was increase the productivity and introduce a tool so that they can better track their produce and get alerts as well. So our vision of resilience was, again, to increase the capability of these farmers and help them organize and access to credit. So we had 4 main components. First was to provide them legal guidance and to provide them advices from the Philippine Coconut Authority to improve their productivity, increase their access to financial services. So we partnered with a local rural bank and direct access to market. So we partnered with Franklin Baker, who would purchase their products. And lastly is we did a model for pest and disease. So we would send alerts if there's a big change in climate. We geotag the farmers so that if we find out that there's a storm coming in, we identify the geography of where they will be located and who will be affected so that we can set SMS as a signal and as alert. So we also registered 27,000 farmers so that the profile of these farmers can be used by the rural bank as credit scoring. We also developed a tool for them so that they can have what we call advice through the community agents and through the field officers. We always say, because there's a technology involved, the power of the tool lies in the user of the tool. And so in this case, who are the users of the tool? These are your field officers, your farmers, and your agronomists. And when we want to understand how these people use the tool, we have to go down and go to the ground and actually spend time with them. There are many realities that farmers face. When we say, okay, how far does it take to get to point A to the next farm or the next market? They say 40 minutes. Okay, is that 40 minutes by walking? Is it 40 minutes under the sun? 40 minutes by land, by boat? So these are questions that we want to, from the very beginning, understand and answer. And so in Grameen Foundation, we go to the ground so that we face the realities and we make sure that these methods are done through interviews, shadowing. Shadowing means going with the person, and mapping. Mapping means identifying the various access points throughout the journey. And as a non-government organization, I would like to show these because this diagram probably fits in the relationship between our partners. So the green circle represents Grameen Foundation. And as an NGO, we're challenged with a specific time frame and probably a specific budget that we would work on. The domain requirements, on the other hand, represents our partners and the goals of the private companies that we're working with. And the last is the orange represents the users or our target beneficiaries. So when we're developing the tool, we want to make sure that we always communicate and iterate as much as possible. This is the sweet spot, the one in the blue, that we want to, yes, 1 minute, that we want to meet. The more that you iterate, the more that you are able to work together with these three organizations, or these three stakeholders, the bigger your sweet spot is, the bigger the balance that you are able to achieve. And as an organization and with a private company, sometimes it's so easy to get into the trap of just working together with the private and the NGO and not thinking of your end users because it's faster that way. You know, probably they're too far to go back and get their feedback. So we end up just talking with the fintechs or with the companies or with the agency, and that creates a big trap because we are not able to really understand and see the benefit it will produce for our target beneficiaries. Okay, promise, 2 slides left. So part of our goal was also to do prototyping and role-playing. And in this picture, you will see an agronomist and farmer doing prototypes. So when we were creating the digital tool for our farmers, what we did was we printed paper sheets, put it in the table, and this is very simple, and then we put the designs in these sheets and described them briefly. And then we gathered these agronomists and farmers in one room, and we laid it out, and we asked them, what do you think will be the process for you to better understand the message of this tool? So we did not preempt. And then they identified it slowly. And the key here is, because we did not preempt, at the end, when we gave it back to our fintech partners, they incorporated this, and it made the training later on. So when we went back to the farmer, and they saw that they followed the natural process, the training was faster. And they felt that there is a sense of ownership because they're part of developing the system. And paper is so cheap, so sometimes, you know, you don't have to, it can be scratch paper or what, but the more important thing is the content inside the paper. And we also did some role playing. So when we did the first draft of the tool, we gave it to the farmers and agronomists and for them to use on the ground and see, okay, and get their initial reactions. So defining your problem and then designing it and then delivering it, I think that's the easiest way to remember how you can implement your human-centered design. Define the problem, design with your partners, and deliver it to your beneficiaries. So I guess as a closing, I would like to say that many people can target different kinds of groups and beneficiaries. But I guess if you want to make sure that you create lasting impact, apply human-centered design so that you can really create breakthroughs for the communities that you wish to serve. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christine, for a very in-depth sharing. And now we have Lisa.
Hello, good morning. So good to be here. I know, just happy to be back. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the organization that I come from. My name is Liza Chong. I'm CEO of Index, Design to Improve Life. We are based in Denmark, in Copenhagen, Denmark. Also known, often ranked one of the happiest nations in the world. That doesn't mean that people walk around smiling, happy, but I mean, I'll break it down in terms of maybe some of the values that make Denmark consistently one of the happiest nations. And we're here to innovate for happier societies, so I think that's it's quite on point. So as I mentioned, we're an organization made in Denmark for the world. Denmark is known for many good things. Brand Danish design is something that most of you have heard, and it's probably quite fitting that an organization like ours actually comes from Denmark, where design is actually very much held in strong regard. So Brand Danish design is somewhat a big export to the rest of the world, but we want to export a different type of thinking and a different type of mindset. So what we look at is actually design of a different type. This is a visual which I think resonates quite well in terms of the subject that we're focused on. So we focus on sustainable design. And as you can see here, this is pretty much frames the problem that we have right now in the world. That actually we have perhaps more plastic in the ocean than we do have fish. So what we want to do as an organization is tell these powerful stories of how design can be used in a very concrete way to actually solve some of the most pressing problems of our time. And how we do that. We run the world's largest design award with a focus on sustainability. It's one of the oldest, has been around for 15 years. We focus heavily on investment. I say heavily, but in the past 4 or 5 years, we've focused on investing into cases that are actually improving quality of life. And then we also run education programs. So how do we actually take the extractive methodologies from these cases that we see, and all the learnings in terms of how they actually go to market and actually are in the hands of the users that they're intended for? What are the educational components that we can actually teach to the next generation? So we essentially try to create a holistic way of viewing the work that we do. So let's go back to Index Award. Index Award is a biennial design award, still the largest in terms of monetary value. It's worth €500,000. So we are funded by the Danish government. So the Danish government very generously provides €500,000 every second year so that we can actually reward and celebrate some of the best innovations when it comes to addressing sustainable challenges. So what we do is we want to tell the personal stories. So what you see here on stage are our 5 winners from 2017. They're people with very powerful, inspirational stories, and that's what we want to do as an organization, is to retell those individuals' profiles and their stories so that it actually gains traction over and above the design community, which is still quite small. So, as I mentioned, we're a biennial, so it's every second year that we run the Index Award. So right now we're in a nomination phase. So if you know of any great ideas, feel free to nominate them. It's free and accessible, and everything easily done on our website. Since the start of Index Award, we've handed out €3.5 million in prize sums. And consistently from the ministry, so the name of the ministry has actually changed several times, by comparison to the actual funding. But yeah, we have been generously supported by the Danish government. So we've seen over 8,000 designs coming through Index Award since 2005. So these are cases, concrete, tangible solutions that actually take away some of the fuzziness of, okay, so what is design? So here are some cases, and there's an evolution to how solutions have changed over the course of time. We've seen over 506 finalists and winners that have been selected through that process. So we have an independent jury that discuss whether something is designed to improve life or not. And from those 506, we push those stories out to the world. So we kind of use that as a leverage, as a way of being able to tell more broadly what design to improve life is all about. And then, of course, over 85 countries represented worldwide. So we use challenges as our framework. So we start with the global challenges, the global goals, beautiful piece of visual communication, but actually it tells a lot in terms of where we are as a global community addressing some of the pressing challenges of our time. It's time limited. I try not to sort of get too stuck on this, because I think there are other challenges over and above these tidy 17 goals. And I think we shouldn't actually just be too confined to them, because I think that's maybe that's the creatives in us, that we have to think out of the box and think beyond the box thinking here. But we actually have to start looking at other emerging challenges which are on the horizon that don't fit into that tidy grid. So we have to look at post-factual society. We have to look at the balance between artificial and human intelligence. We have to start look at the general sort of malaise and apathy that we have in the world right now, and these don't fit into the SDGs. So we have to actually, as an organization, start researching and finding the attributes of emerging challenges that threat humanity. So within Index and the way that we evaluate design to improve life, we have a criteria, and we work within the criteria of form, impact, and context. And Kara just mentioned earlier the importance of impact. I mean, I can't emphasize that enough either, but I think it's important that when we're here to talk about design, we also have to think about the form and the interaction between the design and the human. So when we talk about form, we very much talk about the design itself, the material, the functionality, oftentimes colors, the tangibility. So for us, it's really important to actually have that described so that we're able to communicate what the design actually is. And sometimes when you have a piece of tech, it's not just labeled tech, there is a design element to it. So as best described for us, the better it is for us to actually communicate further. So examples in terms of how we evaluate form, for instance. I'm going to show you a few cases that sort of, for me, actually answer that, because I think here we have a beautiful mask. It's somewhat a provocation, designed by Kilo Design, but also together with a Singaporean-based designer to address the challenge around air pollution. So, of course, it's a bit depressing that you have to send your kid out to school wearing a mask, but I mean, the problem is there, and what's the easiest solution that you can actually use to address that problem is actually an educational mask to help kids feel understanding and an understanding of the problem. So Wooby Players is something that's actually just addressing a very immediate and urgent problem. Happy to say that actually, at least in China, there are some legislations now that have actually made it somewhat obsolete, which is a good thing, because of course we don't want kids going to school. The only way for kids to be able to have clean air is to be wearing masks and playing in playgrounds. But I mean, it's important to actually highlight the problem. Much that this problem also, I don't know how many cyclists we have in the room here, but in the Scandinavian countries, or especially in Copenhagen, we cycle a lot. So 60% of cyclists in Copenhagen use bikes to get to work every day. It's just the quickest, it's the cheapest, it's the easiest. But one thing that we do have a problem is that people don't wear cycle helmets. And actually it's a very, you could say, developed world challenge, that we are quite vain. We're quite conscious of our vanity, and wearing a big plastic cycle helmet actually messes up with the hair. So what do you do? What do you do if you want to cycle, you want to do it safely, and you don't want to get run over by a car or a bus? Well, you design an invisible hairbag. So it works like an airbag. You wear it as a collar. And it was designed by 2 industrial designers from Sweden. So again, the form is rethinking the cycle helmet. How do you actually solve a problem such as cycle safety, and do it in a way that's actually respectful and at least kind of contextual for the individual, for not wanting to ruin their hair, but also, ensuring that they're cycling safely. Coming back to impact, for us, when we evaluate impact, we're looking at the potential impact of a design. Of course, when we see a number of solutions coming through the award cycles, we need to quickly get a sense of, okay, what is the scale of impact here in this design? And potentially, what are the minimal negative effects of that design? So one example of the potential impact is one of our winners from 2015 called Peak Retina. This is a low-cost smartphone adapter, enabling professional eye care examinations anywhere in the world. So for us, you can argue this is just a device, this is just a little dimps, as they call it in Danish, that you can attach to a smartphone. But what we see is empowerment. We see the potential in enabling patients to actually get treatment and access to healthcare early on, so that they're not actually in a situation where they are hindered from actually getting jobs and being able to maintain their lifestyles. So we see these things as critical, and look over and above the actual artifact itself, but what is the trajectory in terms of impact. Another example is Zipline. So this is a winner from 2017. And This is the world's only drone delivery system, believe it or not, and operating at national scale, sending urgent medical supplies, so blood, vaccines, to those in need. So how it works is that you have a drone that flies across long distances, and it has a little deployment mechanism that deploys the vaccines and blood wherever it's needed. So it's deployed in exact locations. So what this does, and if we're talking about the impact trajectory here, is that you don't need to build roads, you don't need to build health clinics, and you don't need to build hospitals. So this is a solution that's very efficient. It answers those critical challenges, but it also means that you don't need capital intensive investments in places where you actually need to supply urgent medical equipment. So you can kind of do away with a lot of the heavy infrastructure that we're so used to. And finally, context. So we look at context in terms of where the use of that design is going to be applied. So one thing that's designed in Copenhagen in Denmark may not necessarily translate in Shanghai, for instance. So we often evaluate based on the adaptability of that design. So for instance, one example is Foldscope. This is an ultra low cost origami microscope. So this is actually, it costs $1. It's super easy. It's designed by Manu Prakash, who's a genius. He's a Stanford professor. And he's all about frugal science. He's all about taking design outside of the labs, heavy equipment that costs crazy loads, and being able to really democratize that, enable everybody to have access to the equipment that scientists are actually typically used to using in laboratories, and making that free and available to the masses. Finally, another really exciting project that we see, I mean, and again, comes back to this contextual thinking, is a design called What Three Words? It's by far one of my favorites, and it actually looks at addressing on a global system which hasn't actually been revolutionized since addressing was ever created, or when it was ever created. But it's very simple, and I think, you know, again, it's taking sort of design and the application of design far over and above one's individual kind of need, but actually more broadly, what are the potential applications of this, perhaps to those people who don't have addresses out there in the world, and that's roughly estimated to be about 4 billion people. And I'll let Chris explain to you what the design's about.
So I worked in the music business for 10 years, and every single place that we went to every day, whether trying to find the entrance to a stadium in the UK or a villa halfway up a mountain in Italy, everybody always got lost. So they were putting an address into their GPS device or sat-nav, but it wouldn't take people to the right place. So I wanted to make something really simple that covered the whole world to like a couple of meters of accuracy, so that everybody could just always arrive in the right place. So What Three Words is a global address system. We've divided the world into 57 trillion 3-meter squares, and we've named each square with 3 words from the dictionary. So by saying something like table, chair, spoon, I'm referring to one point in the world somewhere. So one of the things we were trying to do is take these GPS coordinates, but they're 16 digits and very complicated, and condense them into something far simpler for people to use, which is why we made a 3-word address, because people can remember and communicate 3 words. Having an address is essential for people to live. The UN says that 4 billion people live without an address, and actually 3/4 of countries do not have adequate address systems. It's a whole bigger problem that a lot of people actually think about. Now this means that people often can't vote, they can't register with their local government for services, you can't get like electricity connected to your house. Just imagine if you can't actually describe where you live to someone, you've got nothing to fill out on a form, you can't get a bank account or get a loan. In many ways, it's just very debilitating. What Three Words is helping people all over the world Three-word addresses are helping people to find a water point in Kenya. They're being used by the Philippine Red Cross to coordinate where aid should be going to. They're being used to deliver mail in Tonga, to deliver e-commerce packages in the Middle East, and some really serious use cases with the UN, who are coordinating disaster relief efforts all over the world. But then through to people just coordinating where they're going to go for a run in the Himalayas, to rock climbers in Lebanon. There's an amazing set of ways that people are using three-word addresses. Our vision for What 3 Words is to be a global standard. We want people to be able to see those 3 words and know exactly what it means. They should be able to put them into any app. They should be able to use them with any service, to get a taxi, to register for something. And this is what we're striving for every day.
So yeah, What 3 Words? Download it, it's great. They've just done an integration with Airbnb, but they're also the official addressing system in Mongolia. So I mean, I guess like if we're talking about contextualizing, I mean, this is probably the best case for me, or the most exciting case, I think, that explains that. So I urge you, if you are designers, innovators, anybody with a social mission and a love for design, and you have designs, nominate them for Index Award, and join us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. There are a lot of great examples, and we can see that aesthetic can coexist with social impact, which is good. So I would like to just take advantage of being a moderator to ask the panelists here a few questions, and then I will invite all of you to ask your questions as well. So first of all, Kara, I'm really dying to know more about the program in Ghana, about like the mobile health program. Can you tell us a little bit more about that project?
Sure. So it's Mobile for Development through GSMA, and we worked with them in 6 locations to do research to understand how we could get farming information to those who don't have 3G or 4G or 5G or any of the Gs, and don't have a smartphone necessarily. So how many of you had a feature phone? As in, there was no data, like we know. I don't have my phone on me, it's a miracle, but you know, I don't have a phone with apps. I have a phone that really just is SMS. And how do you spread that information when you have people speaking 12 different languages? Really challenging. So what we did with each individual mobile network operator was come up with a product that made sense for that context, and then created that product in a conceptual form. Obviously, the phone company themselves actually built it and coded it to make it work. In the case of Ghana, because of the 12 different languages, one of the things they added in was a third party who was a content provider and had a call center where you could get agricultural information in your language. So where it was maybe more challenging to understand what was on the phone, they were still even providing support with a phone call, because as we know in many contexts, phones win over text messages any day of the week. And so we needed to have that option included. And yeah, Ghana is one of the countries, but there are others: Myanmar, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Pakistan. My favorite is Pakistan, not because I went there, but hearing the stories of the frogs, which is what we call ourselves, the frogs who went there to understand the scenario. One of our frogs is originally from Pakistan, and he got to go, and we obviously wanted impact. We wanted to know what was the impact. So he asked one of the farmers, "So how is the product working for you?" And he said, "I don't need to tell you. I can just show you." And he goes, "On this side is what I did with my crop before you gave me this information. And on this side is what you have now that I've used your information. And as you can see, the crop is telling you how good it is working."
Oh, excellent, excellent, thank you. So just one follow-up question for you. Oh, sorry, before we do that, can we get some water? Yes, thank you, thank you. So a follow-up question to that, because you have done a lot of successful cases with the commercial sector. And how is it different when you work on like social impact projects?
That's a really great question. I think for me personally, it's different because I actually see the impact much sooner. As I was describing, if you work in the automotive industry, separate of Tesla and other cars that are getting made faster, it's 5 to 6 years for a car to come into the market. When you're dealing with things like impact or a program where you're building a mobile product, obviously a mobile product can be built more quickly, but you get immediate feedback on your ideas. And I think that's the biggest difference. I think the other big difference is you have to work a little bit harder to understand cultural nuance and cultural difference and cultural norms that you can assume you know about your own culture. But until you actually are faced with somebody else's culture or norms, you start to realize how many assumptions you make about your own. But I think what impact projects have taught me a lot about and taught us as frogs is how quickly you can get impact with very minor changes to things. So I love the example of it doesn't have to cost a lot. You don't have to create entire new systems. Actually, small things can make a big difference. And I think the other thing is just really understanding how to get over assumptions is the biggest eye-opener.
Great, thank you. I have some question for Christine. So I really like your sharing because it's really like an in-depth analysis of what actually I've done. So I would like to know more about like by adopting this human-centered design approach or design thinking, how would you say it's different from if you adopt a more conventional approach? Would the results be different?
Well, in terms of the organization, coming from the organization side, applying design thinking, as what she said a while ago, you can see the direct impact, but it also gives us flexibility. Sometimes we get to save time, and eventually later on, if we find out, okay, we need to iterate more, we have that room for iteration. It saves us time, it saves us in resources and budget-wise. So we're talking about grants by either government or private institutions, and we need to report not just to our beneficiaries, but also to these people who provide our funding. So on the organization side, it helps us think fast and be flexible, and it also makes sure that our solutions will not harm people. We have this no harm principle, and we want to make sure that at the end of the day, it will be used by the beneficiary in the long term. Because we don't want to just pilot and then in the next year they won't use it. We want them to use it long term. So by doing human-centered design, you get to save time, you get to save your resources, but at the same time you know that it will be used wisely.
Good.
Yeah.
Do you have something else to add?
Well, it's always very challenging, I guess, to work with multiple partners because as if we work with a fintech, they have their own goals, they have their own ideas. But we are the third party that will say, you need to think of these people and your idea will not work if you don't address these issues. So by us stepping in and giving them that feedback to them, they're appreciative of it, and it also goes a long way in building relationships with your partners because you're honest and you tell them that you can always say, oh, your ideas are working nice, and so on. But if it's not true by the things that are happening on the ground, then their business can also fail in the long run. So it's a win-win if we share ideas and be honest in the conversation. Yeah.
Thank you. So Liza, I know that your organization is also advocating putting more structured creativity into the education. So why is it important to teach the younger generation about design thinking approach?
I don't think there's any other option. I think, so what I didn't mention earlier was our involvement within the education sector, both in Denmark but also internationally. So what we've been doing is we've developed a methodology, a set of tools that we've been implementing within the education sector in Denmark. And it's difficult, as in it is a hard thing to be able to show results very quickly, especially depending on who is actually funding that type of program. But why I believe it's important for the next generation is I think, as we can all agree, design thinking processes definitely help fine-tune an understanding of what the challenge is, what the greater challenge, the meta challenge, not just the, okay, here is a problem and let's try and find a solution. It's actually a lot more analytical depth of the kind of connectivity of challenges and the systems around it. So I think design thinking is a really good exercise to train younger minds to sort of think outside of just subjects and academic subjects, but actually how to actually create systems across those different subjects. But more critically, I think it's important that young people are trained to ask the questions. And I mean, this also goes a little bit against what we're trying to teach kids, which is to listen and to obey. And perhaps, I mean, I think in some education systems, critical thinking hasn't been taught at an early stage. So I think design thinking is perhaps a good way of actually building that confidence in asking critical questions and listening to other people, being inclusive in terms of generating ideas from across generations, but also across different sectors of society, and building that empathy. So by listening and by understanding and being able to sort of formulate decisions around that, I think it's such an important skill to develop, because, I mean, my fear is that design thinking or those types of that gets rendered a subject, because I don't believe that it's a subject in itself. It has to be something that can be applied in a multiple grouping of subjects. And I think if there were any teachers in the room, it'd be really interesting to hear your view, like how you think about design thinking and how you would like to apply that in school classroom settings. But yeah, for me, I think it's so critical that we're actually training kids, but also empowering teachers to be able to communicate it and sort of help kind of ease them into being able to, build that bridge.
Excellent, thank you. So we have so many audience here. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions. So let's build in a little bit more time for our friends here to ask questions. So who would like to go first? Anyone? Okay, I know that you volunteer first. And this gentleman, Kelvin, and this gentleman. Okay, for yeah? Okay. That's fine. Both of you get a chance. Okay.
Hi, I'm Calvin from the Good Lab, and we do a lot of design thinking stuff in Hong Kong. And thank you for all of your sharings. And it's my heart is in international development, so it's great to see so many like international case studies. But I work in Hong Kong, and I guess for let's say like design thinking is like system 2 innovation, and the traditional form is system 1. Do you have any recommendations for applying this new way of innovation when it comes, head to head with an old type of innovation, which I was thinking of this word. It's like, not once did I hear you say the word, let's form a committee or a steering panel. These are not used in design thinking. It's really, face to face. So any suggestions, like whether it's with the Filipino government or with, what 3 words, like how did they, Mongolia can use it because they don't have an address system, but what 3 words in Hong Kong government, can you do that? Like, what's that shift? And how do you persuade system 1 people to go to the new system?
Well, I live in Germany, and they are waking up to design thinking. And I say that, I'm sorry if you're German in the audience, I say that because the companies we work with love committees. And a workshop means sitting in the audience. It doesn't mean getting your hands dirty, typically. And what I've seen is, and maybe this isn't a recommendation, but what's really interesting to me, at least in business, is a lot of the business people are doing Silicon Valley tours to go see what's this rage about startups and, you know, all of this, and coming back and being quite transformed. So I won't kick it out. I won't, as we say, I won't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Sorry for people who are translating. That's like the worst thing to translate. I won't throw everything away for that one thing that doesn't seem so right. But honestly, the only way that I have been able to do transformation, which is I think what you're talking about, is to show proof. Because, yeah, we can sit in this room, in this lovely convention center with an amazing sun shining outside and talk to ourselves, and it's really easy. So I hear you. I think the ways that I've seen the most success is application. I appreciate yesterday in the opening session, action. Stop just talking about process of design thinking, show action. And I think you probably have it happening. I think it takes time. We are not creatures who like change. We're adaptable, but we don't like change. But where I love design, the making of something, and Frog's tagline is love what you make. We love what we make, and we're makers at heart. And I think the sooner you can make something for a government that they can see an impact, the sooner they will go, oh, I can't really deny it. So I like to think of it as grassroots. I like to have the freedom to fail, which is not fun, but it's what design thinking gives you permission to do. I'm not arguing to do a failure system for a large city, but you can prototype your ideas and show government how things have changed. And I see this happening all around the world. So Hong Kong is not alone in being an opportunity, a prime opportunity to get past committees. But I think it requires patience and perseverance, so I hear you.
I don't know if this is working. Is it working? Yeah. I completely agree with... closer. Okay. I completely agree with Kara. So proof, always evidence. I think also there's a language, sort of an old paradigm language and a new paradigm language. And I think by definition, the fact that you recognize the steering committees, the panels, everything that goes with the kind of old paradigm, just recognizing that they exist and you hear them and you respect the need for, in some ways, maintaining those kind of very rigid ways or decision-making mechanisms, just by definition is good. It's one step, just understanding the language and trying to apply that to a new context. I would say just making sure that you have the right people around you who can be sort of your champions, and they may be the crazies, and they may be the ones who are just going to be the big risk takers. Okay, so you're crazies there. So you bandy together. You basically find the crazies. You know, whether it's in the business world or even there's got to be one in the government as well. There's got to be someone who's just tired of like the old guard, and I think you sort of bandy together, because I think your communication would be much stronger if you're able to actually get the buy-in from people who also believe in that mission and believe in that purpose. So one example I'm going to give is I'm wearing a garment today by a brand called Carcel. And Carcel it's a Danish brand. What they do is that they actually employ women in prisons in Peru. So this is actually, for me, a piece of empowerment again. They are actually doing something that is fundamentally different. I mean, there are a number of different brands that are trying to take an ethical stance. But what they've actually done is that they are retailing on Net-a-Porter, which is a global brand where you can buy lots of different things Don't use it myself, it's way too expensive. But anyway, so what they did, they wanted to, they engaged with Net-a-Porter, and they had a lot of discussions for about a year to see if their garments could actually be sold on their website. What they actually ended up doing was that Net-a-Porter has like a code of conduct. Basically, you don't employ kids, and you have to make sure that there's a fair minimum fair at least minimum wage for people who are producing those garments. And of course, rule number one, you don't employ people who are incarcerated. Well, that's everything about their business model, is that they're employing people who are in prison, women who are in prison, and using the time that they're in prison to actually produce garments so that they're able to actually build up and save some money, so when they are out of prison, they're not locked into a cycle of poverty. So they basically broke Net-a-Porter's rules by just being a brand that Net-a-Porter wanted on their kind of portfolio of brands. But it's doable. It's doable if you're sort of if you're resilient enough and persistent enough to actually fight it. Those rules can be changed. So I think it's just building up the evidence base, showing proof, and just a determination that actually people want the right things, and you're helping move people in that direction.
Christine?
They've said a lot, but I like what she said a while ago when love what you do, but I would also say be good at what you do. Constantly innovate yourself also as an organization. And when you meet these government officials, we work a lot with government and private institutions. Sometimes they don't see your solution as a priority because maybe there are other bigger problems. There's a disaster. First is relief of goods or release of loans for these people. Or maybe hunger. There's a storm that came in and the crops are gone. So the government is going to tell you, this is not our first priority, but how can we... So you frame your storytelling and you frame your position or your proposal to them as part of their priority. How can we solve that particular problem and work together? And I always think, like what you said a while ago, and showing evidence, it helps a lot, especially if you're just given 5 minutes to present a solution to a government official. You want to make sure that you deliver your case point from what your problem is, what we've done in the past, and what we can offer you now. Because if they don't see that value in 5 minutes, your proposal is gone. And sometimes an email can change the conversation. If you miss that email, and it happened before, sometimes they send you an SMS or send you an email, and you don't reply immediately, you lose that meeting and you lose the opportunity to work together. So be good, love what you do, be good at it, and constantly also innovate yourselves. If you feel that digitalization is not the way to go, then accept it. Find ways to work together with other partners that will probably provide the same results, but from a different solution. And we are open to that as well, because we need to be culturally sensitive, and more importantly, we need to value the family and the household who will be impacted by the solution.
Thank you. So that question from gentleman there. Yeah.
Morning, Yuri from the Lean Academy and the UNSDSN. This question sparks from Lisa's slides. Thanks for bringing out the SDGs and the emerging challenges there. If there's any experience the panelists can share about how to address on empowering or really providing experience or the awareness journey for the youngsters on trust, empathy, and tolerance, that would be great. I think this has been something you all have shared. Kara, you talk about assumption. Christine, you talk about working with the private and public sector. I think this question will be helpful to educators, especially working on the youth, just like myself, as well as people who probably want to have kids, because I guess these values, they are really important. After all, we are all as a result of the characters that are rooted in our childhood. Thank you.
How to engage more with youth around trust, empathy, and tolerance. Is that the quote? Yeah, again, using design thinking, yes. Again, I come back to cases. I think as much of what's been tried before. I think maybe if I take a more general view, because I think I don't have the answer to how we can help our next generation sort of be more trusting and more tolerant. But I think there's a reason why we're an index. We want to be able to sort of showcase examples and concrete sort of tangible cases of where design thinking has been applied. And something that was perhaps awarded a prize in 2005 may actually be completely irrelevant now, just by definition, by proxy of technology and the advances within technology, that some things will just be redundant. But what we would like to at least appeal to people here is that rather than start from scratch every single time, start from the best. So if you're going to innovate, and what designers tend to do is to look at the references. Okay, what are all the existing cases within solar technology or solar lamp filtration systems, water filtration systems? Don't start from zero. Start from the best that you can find, and innovate from there. I think because it's sort of standing on the shoulders of a lot of history and a lot of development that's already taken place. I think if we're going to try to actually build on the best, I think that's a better starting point than just redoing everything from scratch. So I would urge you to find your examples and find what you like. Maybe it's something that's totally different in terms of a technology or solution, but like the thinking, extract the the components that make it for you individually very appealing, and use those as reasons or as justifications on why a certain direction should be formulated.
We've run design camps with kids, and that's where the collective action toolkit for me is it's tools. It's actually downloadable tools. You can run them through. They become their own advocates for their own problems. So we put challenges in front of them, like how would you make a better city? Or how would you get around in public transportation? And kids are awesome. Youth are awesome because they have a million ideas and they are not inhibited the way we are when we get old. And we realize things can fail and we feel embarrassed by failure. They're willing to try anything. So I encourage you to hang out with kids a lot, as I see you are, and give them the chance to design solutions. And then those are the kinds of things I'd be taking into government. I mean, it's bold. It's really bold. But when people see that the next generation wants something, it's a really powerful statement. So the work that you're doing is really good. So let them showcase what they think is their future.
Excellent. I think we have time for one last question. Anyone want to take that opportunity? Okay, thanks.
Hi, thanks very much for the very inspiring dialogue. I would like a question about the education system. How would design thinking formally incorporated in education system? For example, would that be part of a module to teach philosophy course or whatever to students, or it had been incorporated when you teach biology, whatever? It's just naturally using design thinking as a tool. Should it be starting with kindergarten and all that? What's your vision, especially in Denmark, Philippines, or in Germany? What's the comparison? Have you done any other comparison? Thanks.
Yep. So the educational program that we did sort of came at a time in Denmark where there was a big school reform. So that's just a bit of sort of background and context. And we did a big 3-year, multi-year project in the north of Copenhagen, in a municipality called Helsingør. And there we rolled out a program, a train-the-trainer program with 3,000 teachers in that municipality. And it was really hard. I'm not gonna sort of sort of, you know, kind of make it any different. It was a very, very tough program. And I think one thing we have actually learned from that process was very much, first of all, it was very much about training the teachers, because actually engaging students and kids is not difficult. I think actually that's, like we assume that actually the hardest part is actually getting kids involved. Actually, kids are very, very easy to engage in design processes. The hardest is actually engaging teachers. And I think teachers have actually often very much under a lot of pressure, especially when there are cycles of school reforms where they are under pressure to perform, and they have a lot of administration to kind of see to, and they also get a lot of new tools and new techniques and new programs that they have to implement. So I mean, it's okay. They're kind of like working in a sea of kind of newness all the time. So by the time we came to implementing our program, the teachers were actually rather resistant, and it wasn't because they didn't want to accept it, but I think it's just this kind of sort of a machine of training up like a whole sort of workforce of teachers who already are under an enormous amount of pressure, and also the timing. You know, the school reform was you know, a piece of legislation that was sort of thrown down on them, and now you just have to implement, and now you have to do more innovation, go. And I think just being sympathetic to the conditions that you're working within. And of course, it was a 3-year program of training the mindset. It's not so much the tool itself. Design thinking is a great tool to be used, but actually it's very much about empowering the facilitator, in this case teachers, to actually be comfortable, to feel confident with the tools. So I would say it wasn't so much, okay, here's some kind of hard skills, but actually how do we actually train up the mindset so that they can think about, okay, how does this apply to the subject that I'm teaching, maths, or how does this apply to Danish? Because oftentimes they still feel inadequate because they think they have to be a designer in order to be able to use the tools. So there's a lot of kind of demystifying that needs to be done before you can even get to that place where you're actually, okay, so here are some practical ways of learning about these tools. You actually have to get a lot of preparation in place, and it's a lot of preparation in terms of training the mindset, and especially within the sustainability context as well. So I don't know if that answered.
Yeah, thank you very much. So in the interest of time, I think we are about to close the session. So thank you very much. I think we all agree that we have learned a lot. So Kara, I really, really appreciate your organization being so generous and open, and also prepare a toolkit whereby all of us can just have it a go. But as someone with experience in doing actual projects before, I think my reflection is that design thinking or human-centered approach is really something that you need to learn by doing, right? So you really need to get your hands dirty. So when you're ready to do that, do go to the Frog website and then download the toolkit and follow it. And also look at some of the examples by Grameen, as Lisa pointed out before. It's better to stand on the shoulder of giants and then learn from the best. And also, when you have some good ideas, remember that you can always join index competition. So thank you very much for your time and your energy. Thank you.